किस अर्थ में ये द्विजत्व प्राप्ति थी, इसका कुछ अंदाजा एक घटना से लग सकता है। शांति निकेतन में एक विधवा अपनी कन्या का विवाह हिंदू विधि से करना चाहती थी। किसी ने कह दिया कि नांदी श्राद्ध विधवा नहीं कर सकती। गुरुदेव ने नए नए काशी के ज्योतिषाचार्य हजारी प्रसाद द्विवेदी को बुलवा भेजा। पूछा, हिंदुओं का हजारों वर्ष का इतिहास है, क्या उसमें पहली बार ये घटना हो रही है? पहले भी तो कभी ऐसी स्थिति आई होगी। पंडित जी घर आए, स्मृति ग्रंथों की छानबीन की, देखा कि पूर्व पक्ष में ऐसे बहुत से वचन हैं जो विधवा के इस अधिकार को स्वीकार करते हैं, लेकिन वचनों की संगति लगाते समय निष्कर्ष रूप में यही कहा गया है कि विधवा को ऐसा अधिकार नहीं है। जाकर गुरुदेव को बताया तो हंसकर बोले, क्या पूर्व पक्ष के वे कुछ ऋषि कुछ कम पूज्य थे जिनका खंडन उत्तर पक्ष में किया गया है? इस प्रश्न ने पंडित जी को झकझोर दिया। परंपरा क्या उत्तर पक्ष ही है, पूर्व पक्ष नहीं? जिस परंपरा को अब तक वे अखंड समझते आ रहे थे, देखते देखते शिव धनुष के समान खंड खंड हो गई। लगा के परंपरा और भी हो सकती है। एक तरह से ये इतिहास बोध का उदय था। To sum it up, Nambar Singh is recalling an incident. Hajari Prasad Dwivedi had freshly reached Shantiniketan. A widow wanted to marry her daughter off, and there is a particular ritual, Nandi Shraddh. So somebody said that widow is not allowed to do that. Gurudev asked Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, since he was a scholar of Jyotish and all those ritual acts. So Hajari Prasad Dwivedi consulted all the Smritis and whatever Dharma Shastras he had with him, and then went to Rabindranath Tagore and told him that, see, in Purva Paksh there are many rishis who concede this right to a widow. But in Uttar Paksh, finally, the consensus is that no, she doesn't have that right. Gurudev laughed and said, do you mean that those rishis, so-called Purva Paksh, who upheld this right for the widow are any less respectable or any less honorable? Now this idea of Purva Paksh and Uttar Paksh, we all know that. So Uttar Paksh is my position, which I am arguing, and Purva Paksh is the position which I am contradicting or criticizing. So when Ramanujacharya is writing a Bhasya on Gita and proving that Gita is essentially a text of bhakti, primarily and in fact only bhakti, Shankaracharya is his Purva Paksh, because Shankaracharya argues something else. Now my question, which I would like you to reflect, all the friends here, both this Purva Paksh and Uttar Paksh are ultimately situated in the same tradition. Are they really two traditions? Or they are a dialogue, maybe a very forceful or maybe even sometimes metaphorically speaking, violent, with violent disagreements, but nonetheless a dialogue. So is this really the other tradition, or this is a dialogue within the same tradition? Nambar Singh, in his own way, deals with this question. I am not particularly satisfied with his arguments on this score, but this is what I think must be kept in mind when we discuss this particular book. Personally speaking, what I find most fascinating contribution of this book is about Nambar Singh's description of the epistemology of the Nirgun Bhakti poets. In Hindi and in other languages also, there had been a huge controversy about the metaphysics of Nirgun Bhakti poets. They were influenced by Shankaracharya, or they were influenced by Ramanujacharya, or they were Vaishnavas, or they were this, or they were that. Hajari Prasad Dwivedi proposed something very interesting and frankly speaking quite untenable. He proposed that Nirgun Bhakti poets are influenced by Naths and their epistemology or metaphysics, Dvait Advait Vilakshanavad. There is nothing like Dvait Advait Vilakshanavad in Indian philosophical systems. But as Nambar Singh points out in this book, and as all of us who are Hindi readers know, that Panditji had a great flair of Kalp Srishti also. He was a great creator of fictions also. So this whole idea of Dvait Vilakshanavad is Pandit Ji's original idea. Namvar Singh makes a very interesting move. He takes the whole discussion on a different level. Instead of dealing with the question that what metaphysics informs the poetry of Nirgun Bhakts, he focuses on their epistemology. He says that this, I mean, he does not say this explicitly, but he focuses on their epistemology and says, citing Gramsci, to make the point that how the popular ideologies influence the perceptions and sentiments and are important material for historical study. He says that actually the Bhakt poets, their epistemology is of empirical rationality. Anubhav Sammat Vivekvad. That is the phrase Namvar Singh uses. This, I think, is a very interesting and very promising description, because basically the argumentative nature of these Bhakt poets is precisely this, that look here, there is an experience, we feel this, we know this, we experience this, and all your philosophies fail to rationalize or explain these things to us. The famous poem of Kabir, Jo tu Baman Bamni Jaya, An Bhat Kahe Nahi Aaya. Jo tu Turak Turak Nahi Jaya, Bhitar Khatna Kahe Na Karaya. So if you insist on your identity as a Brahmin and demand certain privileges on the basis of that, or you think that you are a Muslim and therefore you are superior to non-Muslims, then please tell me that why you did not come to this world in some other way instead of coming that.
It seems there is some problem, I believe.
Yeah, we seem to have lost him.
It can happen to anybody of us.
Yeah, online is the problem.
Yeah. Within university, sometimes power goes.
Yeah. True. रुचिंदा भाई आप है नहीं चला गया?
हाँ, मैं हूँ। आप लोगों को मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
अभी
Can you hear me? Can you see me?
अभी आ रहे हैं.
Yeah, now it's okay.
It's okay, sir?
Yeah,
अभी ठीक है.
Actually, in between there was some problem.
In between we
Yeah,
lost.
I can't help it, the connectivity thing.
It can happen to any of us.
Yeah. So, even though I am not on Geo, connectivity is not very good. So anyway, so the point I'm making is this, that this observation of Namvar Singh, that these bhakts are actually following the empirical rationality. There are other observations also in that book which are exciting, on with some of those observations one would agree, one would disagree, but the fact remains that it is not the book about the second tradition. It is the book about the other tradition. It is the book about breaking the myth of tradition being a very seamless, very simple, flat construct. It's about exploring the discontents, the fragments within the tradition. It's about exploring the tradition of dialogues in tradition. And the importance of this book is obvious by the fact that, to the best of my knowledge and memory, this was the last book which Namvar Singh properly wrote. That was published in 1982. And after that, my Gurudev, who got very long life and was active almost till his end, firmly believed in the Maukik Parampara, never bothered to write anything, except some articles here and there, some editorials here and there. And he went on speaking. And actually, I felt very uneasy with that. And sometimes I felt angry with him and I used to quarrel with him. And he always used to tell me, हाँ पुरुषोत्तम जी आप ठीक कह रहे हैं, अब बैठ कर लिखूंगा, अब बहुत हो गया. And obviously he never did. But the fact remains that in his Maukik Parampara there was a positive feature also. There are many problems in that kind of observance of Maukik Parampara, but the fact remains that Namvar Singh actually worked as professor at large. He spoke to thousands of people. He taught us in classroom, but he taught thousands of people outside the classroom. And forgive me, it's very difficult for me to talk about Namvar Singh without getting somewhat emotional. Because as I told you, we had a very interesting relationship. Sometimes I used to feel very angry with him. He will go to a Lokarpan, to a launching of a book, and the book might have been written by, a Bahubali, Atmakatha, and Namvar Singh will not only praise that book, but also compare the Bahubali with the leaders of national movement who wrote their books in jail. So such things Namvarji used to do sometimes, and which caused hilarious situations for us and sometimes embarrassing situations also. But the fact remains that his books, particularly Kavita Ke Naye Pratiman, to my mind that is his most important book, because there you come across the fundamental departure point of Namvar Singh's criticism, and that is आलोचना अर्थ मीमांसा पर आधारित मूल्य निर्णय की प्रक्रिया है. Criticism is ultimately an act of evaluation. It is not merely a reading. It's not merely a reconstruct. It's an evaluation. Needless to say, any evaluation has to be done on the basis of certain premises. And Namvar Singh's premises were very clear on that. In his last important lecture in 2010, where he was speaking about Alochana Ka Bhavishya, the future of criticism, he maintained quite categorically that there has been too much of discourse on literary criticism. We must go back to the text. There is no point in criticizing or theory formation on the basis of literature without actually engaging with the text, without actually engaging with the analysis of meaning, and then arriving at some evaluative judgments. Mool and Eld. So with all these words, I thank you once again, Arun, and may I now request Harish to make his points, make his presentation. हरीश
अनम्यूट योर स्पीकर.
हरीश आपने अपना स्पीकर शायद म्यूट कर रखा है. प्लीज अनम्यूट इट.
Check the bottom left. Yeah.
Professor, do you have earphones connected to your laptop?
Maybe, yeah. Check. If earphone is connected, disconnect it. Yeah.
अरुण आप या तो उनसे फोन पे बात कीजिए अलग से, और तब तक हम लोग या तो रवि रंजन जी से बात सुनते हैं.
Let Ravi start.
Contact Harish in the meanwhile.
I'll talk to him.
So please message him on the phone so that then maybe we can have Ravi Ranjan first and then Harish can join. Is that okay? Arun, is that okay? अब आपकी भी आवाज गायब हो गई है अरुण.
नहीं, मैं तो गायब कर दिया. मैं ये ठीक है. ठीक है.
हाँ, तो मैं इनको रवि रंजन को बुलाऊं फिर.
ठीक है.
प्लीज रवि रंजन जी, प्लीज.
Thank you, sir. So, Professor Agarwal, Professor Kaviraj, my friend Arun Patnaik, and distinguished guests, students of School of Social Sciences. Actually, I am very thankful to Arun to make it possible to discuss a Hindi writer in School of Social Sciences, because usually, people who work in Indian languages,
Right, right.
they are not being given importance in the discourse in the university like ours, where English, it's dominating everywhere. So we are very thankful. Actually, what happened, I believe on Facebook there was a photograph of Professor Namwar Singh when he visited University of Hyderabad in 1992. So when that was displayed by me in a memory, then Arun called me. Said, "Do you know him personally?" I said, "Yes, of course we know him." Because when I was in Muzaffarpur, my guru Acharya Janki Vallabh Shastri and Devendranath Sharma ji, they were there. And Namwar Singh, Kedarnath Singh, they were frequent visitors to Muzaffarpur. So from those days, I know Professor Namwar Singh. In University of Hyderabad, he has visited at least 100 times and delivered at least 50 lectures. So right from my student days, I have been knowing him personally. The first thing I would like to mention that there are few critics in 20th century who have contributed a lot to make Hindi criticism a civilizational criticism or a criticism of civilization. When I'm using this civilizational criticism or criticism of civilization, then I have in mind the word used by Gajanand Madhav Muktibodh, a very famous Hindi poet and critic. He says that the real thing is Sabhyata Samiksha, because literature cannot be studied, cannot be analyzed in isolation. And my friends in social sciences may be very happy that in Hindi literature, in Marathi literature, in Telugu literature, we are studying a lot of social sciences. We have our own understanding. We use social sciences to the extent where we are able to analyze the poetry or the novel in a meaningful way. So there are few critics in Hindi literature. Acharya Ramchandra Shukla, right from him, and then of course Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, Dr. Ram Vilas Sharma, Namwar Singh, and one Professor Agrawal sitting here. So there are several people, they have brought social sciences, the tools of social sciences, while, studying, analyzing literature. And again, I will like to say that they are very careful that the analysis should not be reductionism. We should not reduce the literature, you know, by during our analysis. And in that way, I remember, and Professor Agrawal will correct me, in his famous book, Kabir, Acharya Hajari Prasad Dwivedi has quoted a Sanskrit poet, Murari, Abdhir Langhirev Bhanar Bhatai Kin Twasto Gambhiratam. I am happy that Professor Kaviraj is here and he knows very good Sanskrit. Abdhir Langhirev Bhanar Bhatai Kin Twasto Gambhiratam आपाताल निमग्न पी वड़तनु जाना अति मंदराचला. So Murari says that the real depth of the ocean was not known by this monkey army of Rama. The real depth was known by that Mandarachal Parvata, that mountain. So in literature, we have to be extra careful because any, extra effort to bring a lot of social sciences into literature, it leads to reductionism. And Namwar Singh, one of the tallest critic of Hindi literature in 20th century, so he has been very careful because in one hand he has been, he has translated a lot and he has edited many things from, particularly from Marxism, everywhere. In this book also, Arun and me, there is a binding force, that is Gramsci. So in this book also, Arun, you will find Gramsci. So Namwar Singh uses Gramsci, uses Marx, uses different historians, Irfan Habib, this, that. But he is very careful that he is a literary critic. He is not a social scientist. So this book, as Professor Agrawal mentioned, I also felt after a long time I have, went through this book. Earlier, I believe 10 years back, we keep on reading certain text time and again. Recently, I have read it very carefully and meticulously. There is a lot of polemics in this book, lot of polemics, which could have been avoided. Ajari Prasad Dwivedi is a creative writer. He was a novelist. He has written many great essays. Simultaneously, he was a historian of literature. But while talking about Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, Namwar Singh has brought a lot of polemics. One line Professor Agrawal remembers, I believe, he may be never remembering, that he says that Hajari Prasad Dwivedi was very fortunate that during his formative period, he was away from the shadow of Ramchandra Shukla. So this is too much. Sir, I was shocked actually while reading this line. I was shocked because Ramchandra Shukla, no Hindi critic, including Professor Agrawal or whoever is writing meaningful criticism, nobody can deny the importance of Ramchandra Shukla. In one hand, he has been carrying the legacy right from Bharat Muni to Pandit Raj Jagannatha. On the other hand, he translated, German scholars' book, The Riddle of Universe, and then, he developed his own personality. And then in several lines, I can quote. This is not a literature class. I'm very conscious about that. तो ही सेज दैट खुद भगवान केवल संस्कृत समझता है और केवल अरबी खुदा समझता है, ऐसा मानने वाले लोग अब मजाक के पात्र होंगे, हंसी के पात्र होंगे. दे विल बी लाफ्ड एट, दे विल बी स्कोप्ड एट. सो रामचंद्र शुक्ला was a great critic. He laid foundation of Hindi criticism. There had been differences in Hajari Prasad Dwivedi and Ramchandra Shukla. That's okay. But blowing things out of proportion, sometimes we find in this book a lot of polemics. It's true, as Professor Agrawal mentioned, that after completion of his education, that was also a very torturous experience. Person Tulsidas, a great Hindi poet, has written that poverty, that's the that's the most biggest curse on humanity. Nai daridra sam dukh jagwai. Tulsidas writes that daridrata से बड़ा संसार में कोई दुख नहीं. And the poor Brahmin, studied in Varanasi, and then, there is a mention that he was not having fee. They are not having money to pay fee. And his name was, removed from the roll. And then he finally went to the principal, Mr. Dhruv, and then he was scolded like anything. Nowadays, we cannot afford to talk like that, and we should not. We need not. He was told that go and work as a construction laborer. University is not orphanage. University is not for poor people. So out of anger, the principal told him, and finally, even many people told him that you, to Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, that you go to Mohan Malviya, and you go to some other people, but he never went. So his education was not fully completed. Later, he studied Sanskrit, he studied, those days there were few Maharajas. They used to pay some money to the for promotion of Sanskrit studies. So anyhow, he was educated, and then there was no job in Varanasi. And finally, there was invitation from Shanti Niketan. He went to Shanti Niketan. A full chapter is there where the struggle of Hajari Prasad Dwivedi has been depicted in a very creative way. And there he was fortunate enough to meet, Acharya Shiti Mohan Sen, who had edited Kabir in 4 volumes. And out of that 4 volumes, Tagore himself had translated 100 poems, and with the preface of Underhill, it was published from London. So, after reaching Shanti Niketan, the mindset, the traditional mindset of Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, it was first usually when I came from Bihar to University of Hyderabad, first, there is a cultural shock. People talk in a different way, the body language is different. But then there is a cultural integration. If we are able to, improve ourselves, change ourselves, mingle with people. The same thing happened to Acharya Hajari Prasad Dwivedi. In the beginning, he was not comfortable there, but slowly, he mingled with people. And I read one memoir by somebody that when he used to go to Gurudev, he used to try to speak in Bengali language, and pronunciation was different. So sometimes Tagore used to laugh. But he developed a lot. The all India vision and a particular kind of sense of history, he was able to develop in the company of Rabindranath Tagore. Usually in North India, Kashi, in Urdu it is called Muqaddas Muqam. हिंदुओं का मुकद्दस मुकाम है. It's a great place, place of great Sanskrit scholars and this. But I remember Munshi Premchand. He wrote a letter to Sajjad Jahir. In that letter, he mentioned Kashi as a capital of conservatism. रूढ़िवाद की राजधानी. So from there, Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, he goes to Shanti Niketan, and there he developed, a different sense of history, an all India vision. And the most important thing which Namwar Singh has mentioned, that he started studying, reading Rabindranath. And in one of his articles, Rabindranath says that it is a kind of misconception that whatever Aryan were having was great, and Anarya, they were not having anything valuable. There is a line in this book. He says that, no, that the article in Hindi is title is भारतवर्ष में इतिहास की धारा, the historical stream in India. Then Tagore writes in that nobody should have misconception that Anarya did not give us anything. In fact, ancient Dravid people, they were very civilized, and with the help of those people, the Aryans, they were, prospered, their music, their architecture, other things also. Again, there is a mention of another article by Tagore. वैष्णव धर्म में एक और भगवत गीता विशुद्ध उच्च धर्म तत्व है, तो दूसरी ओर अनाड़े ग्वालों में प्रचलित देव लीला की विचित्र कहानियां हैं. This Lord Krishna and his Leela is a philosophical term. Vallabhacharya says that Leela Katha Rasadi Sevantarena Nannatte Bhagavata Purushottama. So Leela is a philosophical term, but sociologically speaking, Leela is nothing but playfulness. It's a kind of playfulness. So Ravindranath wrote that all these Leela of Krishna and Gopi or Radha, it has come from Anarya culture, and it has prospered the Aryan culture. So that kind of many things, he got it in Shantiniketan, and that he developed, in a very big way, and then he wrote a famous book, Kabir. Because prior to Acharya Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, there were scholars who had edited Kabir Das. One was Ayodhya Singh Upadhyay Haryad, a great poet. He has edited Kabir Vachanavali. Then, one professor of Banaras Hindu University, Shyam Sundar Das, he had edited Kabir Das. But all these scholars, they were of opinion that since Kabir Das, he was not institutionally qualified, he was not a great scholar of Shastra, so when he talks, so sometimes what we in Hindi we call barbolapan, that he talks too much. Without knowing Shastra, he always goes against Shastra. So that people did not like. And most importantly, these scholars, they told that there is a less poetry or sometimes no poetry in Kabir Das. Only preachings are there. Preachings in very commanding language we find in Kabir Das. But Hajari Prasad Dwivedi was the first person in the history of Hindi criticism who wrote that book, and he proved with all arguments that we need to change our conception about poetry, because that is most important thing. And Nabar Singh has quoted Hajari Prasad Dwivedi extensively in this book from his different essays, his different books. and he has proved that what Hajari Prasad Dwivedi wanted to establish the way Kabir was a great poet, it is justified. So that is the main thing. As Professor Agrawal in the beginning has mentioned that three things. One is the revolutionary idea of Kabir. And there also Hajari Prasad Dwivedi says that there are two extremes. And some people think that there can be some kind of coordination, the middle path between the two extremes, which is not possible. Which is not at all possible. If there is a radical thinking, if there is a radical statement, if there is a radical approach, that approach has to be accepted in its own way, in its original form. We need not find a middle path always. So Kabir Das was not, he was not for a middle path. He was attacking whatever rude, whatever bad tradition, bad things on the name of tradition. And when I am using this word tradition, there is a famous statement by Hajari Prasad Dwivedi that when we move, no, then he says that ठहरा हुआ पैर परंपरा है और उठा हुआ पैर आधुनिकता. So he defines in his own way. ठहरा हुआ पैर परंपरा है और उठा हुआ पैर आधुनिकता. So it's a continuous process. So in that way, Damodar Singh says that Hajari Prasad Dwivedi was the real person who was able to invent the other tradition, the tradition which was different from Shastra, which was close to Loka. And in that way, I should conclude now, there are many speakers. In that way, he has talked about the origin of Bhakti movement. And the general perception among Hindi scholars had been that when Islam came to India, then the Hindu people, they felt demoralized, and then they had no option to go for, worshipping. From there, Bhakti has come. General feeling, general conception like that. Hajari Prasad Dwivedi said that no, not at all. And he has quoted Irfan Habib. He has quoted, some other historians. One is John Irwin, where he says that the Bhakti poetry and the Bhakti movement in India was not the product of conflict between Hindu and Muslim community. No, not at all. It was a creative product of the dialectics between Shastra and Loka. And it is tilted towards Loka. I can quote numerous shloka from Srimad Bhagavad, where you find that the structure of the Srimad Bhagavad is Vedanta. But you will find in Srimad Bhagavad few Geet, we can call it song lyric, not lyric, like Venu Geet, like Gopi Geet. So these things, there we find poetry. Otherwise, it's a philosophical treatise. So there is a dialectics between Shastra and Loka, And Bhakti movement and Bhakti literature is tilted towards Loka. This is his, main proposition. And John Irwin, in his article, it has been quoted in this book, he says that in his Marxist, way of thinking, he says that it was a class struggle. It was a class struggle. This is the proposition of John Irwin. Then second most important thing, Namwar Singh says, by quoting Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, that Bhakti movement was the people's movement. It was first all India movement, where we find origin of literature in modern Indian languages. Before Bhakti movement, there was a hegemony of Sanskrit. As nowadays there is a hegemony of English. And due to various historical reasons, we have no other option. We have to follow that. So hegemony of Sanskrit was broken by modern Indian languages, the writers of modern Indian languages. Like in Tamil, we find Alvar and Nayanar. In Kannada, we find Basaveshwar. In Malayalam, we find Narayan Guru. We find Shankar Dev. Lalda in Kashmir, in Hindi literature, there are several writers. So this was the people's movement. It was not against Islam. It originated from the common people. And the reason behind this has been mentioned by Professor Namwar Singh. He has quoted Irfan Habib. Irfan Habib says that when there will be change in mode of production, then the economic relation will change, and economic relation, the changes in economic relation, it will change, it will culminate into, the changes in human relation. So societal changes, economic changes, societal changes, finally, it brings changes into human relation. And then the people who were artisan, like, Kabir was a weaver, Raidas were shoemaker. So when these people, grew,
रवि
sir,
नहीं थोड़ा समय का थोड़ा ध्यान रखें.
sir, I am
No,
concluding.
it's all right, but please.
Yeah, I know. So when these people grew up, then they wanted some kind of, a kind of adhikar in the field of religion, in the field of worship. Social prestige, they wanted social prestige. So that was the Bhakti movement. I am thankful to Arun Patnaik once again to organize this discussion on a great Hindi writer and invited me to speak with my friends, the great social scientists, and my own colleague, Professor Agrawal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raviji. Thank you very much. I think everybody can hear me. Couple of remarks I would like to make. In fact, as far as polemics is concerned, for good or for bad, polemics and controversy were the middle name of Namwar Singh. There wouldn't be Namwar Singh if there wouldn't be any polemics. So I don't think that it is actually fair to expect him not to be polemical. Also, we should not forget the context of the writing of this book. This was 1982, and Hajari Prasad Dwivedi and his kind of poetics was under attack from many quarters, including the Marxist ones. So Namwar Singh was writing in a certain context, and I agree with you. There is little bit of too much of polemics, particularly against Ramchandra Shukla, which was not called for. But And then there is another problem, and Nambar Singh also suffers from this peculiar complex of Hindi speakers. I would just like to quote one sentence from the very first paragraph. And this is a complex from which many of us, that is native Hindi speakers, suffer. कहने को तो यहाँ तक कहा जा सकता है कि द्विवेदी जी की कृतियों में जहां उच्छल भावुकता है वो बंगाल की देन है, और जहां तेजस्विता है वो उनके अपने जनपद की विभूति है. And so the sentimentalism is from Bengal, the rigorousness, the vigorousness is from Hindi area. So these kind of simplifications and generalizations sometimes become part of your writing when you are writing in a certain cultural context, or you are writing to make your point to a certain kind of audience. The other point about Islam, let us seriously recall the statement of Hajari Prasad Dwivedi. And I can repeat it verbatim simply by memory. मैं जोर देकर कहना चाहता हूं कि यदि इस्लाम ना भी आता तो इस साहित्य का बारे आना वैसा ही होता जैसा वो है. I want to say with all force that had Islam not come, even then the 75% of this literature would have remained the same. I think this is a hugely wrong statement. I say it very openly. It's a hugely wrong statement. The arrival of Islam was not merely the arrival of an aggressive religious ideology, as Suklaji perceived and others perceived. And it was not merely the conflict between the followers of two religious communities. The arrival of Islam in India, in the first place, was the re-establishment of a centralized political administration. After 7 centuries, after Harshvardhan, the North India was fragmented politically speaking. It was Delhi Sultanate which provided a centralized political administration. It must have made some impact. The urbanization started again. And if you read the social and economic history of early modern India, this mythology created by colonial powers and colonial episteme, that it was primarily a rural economy and local village economy, this is all nonsense. In fact, the North India in particular and whole of India was deliberately de-urbanized by colonial power. So it was not merely the conflict of religions. Islam in political, in social and cultural sense made a lot of difference. And therefore this statement by Pandit Ji, Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, is historically not tenable. Raviji brought in this category, which is important, which must be reflected upon, and I'm sure Harish will talk about it. Lok Dharma. Lok Dharma was the central category in critical discourse of Ramchandra Shukla. That was his basic parameter of judging a poet. In a way, same is the case with Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, but with a very crucial difference. Lok Dharma in Ramchandra Shukla is a normative category, and the norms come from Varnashram. In his introduction to Surdas, Shuklaji writes this in so many words. Arya Dharma Anumodit Varnashram hi Lok Dharma, so far as Shuklaji is concerned. On the other hand, for Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, Lok Dharma is rather a descriptive category. मैं इसमें लोक में प्रचलित विश्वास, अंधविश्वास, मान्यताएं सबको शामिल करता हूं. And here's the crucial point because of which I believe that the book has been written. And at least in tradition of Hindi literature, it is indeed in a sense dusri parampara. Though as I told you, I'm not very comfortable with this idea of dusri, tisri, chauthi, panchvi parampara. But this statement by Hajari Prasad Dwivedi, मैं लोक को शास्त्र की कसौटी पर जांचने की नहीं, बल्कि शास्त्र को लोक की अपेक्षा में देखने की सिफारिश करता हूं. I recommend that let us evaluate and discuss Shastraj with reference to Lok, not the other way around. We should not judge Lok on the basis of Shastraj. This, I think, and Nambar Singh is right when he emphasizes this, This was actually a नई दृष्टि का उन्मेष. So this dialectics of Lok and Shastra and Hari Prasad Dwivedi opens up lot of possibilities, lot of potentialities. But certainly, I must say again, this idea that Islam hardly made any difference to literary and cultural sensibility of India, to my mind at least, is not tenable, historically speaking. Now, Harish, as I told you, let me remind you, Harish wrote a very thought-provoking and a very interesting review of this book with the title In Search of Other Tradition. The importance, what was that? Harish, importance or some other word? Importance of being number. So that was, to my mind, one of the most fascinating reviews of this important book. So here is Harish. Yes.
Thank you, Purushottamji. Good to be together.
Yeah. In this
Thank you,
Corona
Arun.
hall.
Thank you, Arun. And Shudipto and Ravi Ranjanji and everyone else. I'm delighted to be here as part of this conversation. I could not speak when I was called upon to speak because for some reason I could not unmute myself by clicking on the mic. Then I experimented, and in about 5 minutes time, I was able to unmute myself. And since then, I have behaved, but always been on unmute. I've not spoken in between, but I have kept it on unmute. So, though I could not speak earlier, let me try and prove that I have been listening very intently to everyone who's spoken, Purushottamji and Raviji. About that first page reference to the Vidhava and the Tagore question whether she can perform the rituals needed to perform a Kanyadan, basically. Hari Prasad Ji was very new in Shantiniketan. That was the first critical question that Tagore had put to him. And after lots of consultation of the Shastras and turning it over in his mind and so on, he went back to Tagore. And according to one version of the story, which was told me by Nambarji himself, what Tagore said to him, when Hari Prasad Ji said, no, the widow is not entitled to do this, the Shastras do not say that. So Tagore laughed and said, you think that is the answer I had asked you to give? You think that's the finding I wanted you to find? It was a leading question. Tagore already had in mind the answer he wanted. And Dwivedi Ji, being a Shastri, being a complete Shastri, that was his title. He was an Acharya actually of Sanskrit.
Yes.
So Dwivedi Ji went by the Shastra. He did not go by Loka, and not Loka either. The conflict was between Shastriji and Shastras and Gurudev. And Gurudev had already decided what to do. He just wanted sanction from the Shastri, which ultimately he could see, Hari Prasad Ji. About this article of mine in 1992, it's not a review actually, it's a review of his whole career. It's not about the book.
Mm.
I found later on that I go over his whole career, his intellectual formation, Nambarji's, and the subtitle, The Importance of Being Nambar, is slightly ironical because I refer to The Importance of Being Earnest by Oscar Wilde, which is not very flattering to him. Several people noted that. But as about his way of his career, and the importance that I attribute to him, it is not based on this book. I give this book hardly one paragraph in that longish article. And the reason for that is, I'll come to that in a moment, but before that, let me say that Nambarji, I had and still have infinite admiration for, of absolutely the highest order. You know, Nambarji, I have never met anyone like Nambarji at all. Let me say this over and over again. I have felt this, I've examined my feeling of mine several times. since I first met him in the 1970s, when he came to St. Stephen's College, where I was teaching to give a lecture. Ever since then, I've had the feeling that of all the persons that I have known, all the intellectuals, scholars I've known personally in India and abroad, he was absolutely the most brilliant, the most erudite, the most eloquent, and the most saras, the most enjoyable to listen to read. In this, I make no exceptions. I've been very fortunate in associating with a number of people, some of the toppest order in the intellectual world in the West, and I make no exception. I'm aware of the contradictions. I'm trying to see whether I can go to a speaker view. No, I can't. That's okay. I'm looking at Purushottamji, which is better than looking at myself.
Thanks, if it's a compliment.
So what I'd say is, I'm aware, as I was saying, I'm aware of Purushottamji, what Purushottamji pointed out, Nambalji's political contradictions, the paradoxes of his conduct. And it's not as if any critic of Nambalji knew better than Nambalji what he was doing. He had an unfailing self-awareness and insight into every situation and every action, his own and other people's. And if he still went ahead and did some of the things that other people objected to in terms of ideology, well, that has to be reinterpreted in terms of both who criticized him and the person who did it. I think this is a very piquant situation there. But if you go back to Nambalji, as I said, I was a devotee of Nambalji, and I remain a devotee of Nambalji. And at the same time, my favorite book in his oeuvre is not Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. Purushottamji had already pointed out, he pointed to Kavita Ke Naye Pratiman. What I would say is that the 8 books of his lectures, transcribed and collected with volumes, now they have become 12 volumes or 14 volumes.
Yeah.
Lectures of his noted down, recorded, transcribed, edited, slightly edited and collected, 14 volumes. They are his best work. And if I had to pick just one volume amongst all of them, I would say it's one of those volumes, Premchand or Bharatiya Samaj. There's so many different essays and not essays, there's so many unscripted lectures, many of them given in the birth centenary year of Premchand, and each offering an entirely different and persuasive interpretation of some work or the other. He's not repeating himself, Nambalji, there throughout the whole book. He holds in his mind, in the Vachik Parampara, what many people, after making 10 drafts, cannot say in the written tradition. Let's also value that. And I think that's what he was very good at. His writing, I'm glad that he did not write too many books. They're very slim books anyhow. He never wrote a big one. Actually, I sometimes think of an episode from his early life when he was very poor and unemployed, and despite the fact that his gifts were recognized by everyone, he was thought to be a genius as a critic, and still he was unemployed, and still he was poor. And during that time, a Hindi publisher offered him an advance of rupees 2,000, an enormous amount of money in the late 50s, early 60s. And the commission was to write a history of Hindi literature. After 6 months or 8 months or whatever, the publisher gently reminded Nambalji and said, how is it coming along? And Nambal felt so insulted at this reminder that he went home and out of a box, he took out the 2,000 rupees and he gave it back to the publisher. I sometimes feel that those 2,000 rupees have proved very costly for Hindi. I wish that the publisher had not reminded him. Nambalji had not spent even a paisa from them. Right. He was also a man of honor, despite poverty. So I wish that he had accepted and kept 2000 and actually written a history of Hindi literature, a big history, at least a 400-page history and not a 100-page Dusri Parampara. And that would have been actually a delineation of the Hindi tradition, according to his view, as we have not had in this book or anywhere else. The term Dusri has already been problematized by Purushottamji, also by Ravi perhaps. But let me problematize each term in this title, because I think it's an entirely misleading title. Dusri, Nambaji himself preferred alternative, the word alternative, in search of an alternative tradition, not a second tradition, not an other tradition either. I have a student, I had given a link, I hope he's here, but I don't see him, Akhilesh Kumar, Dr. Akhilesh Kumar, a young lecturer who teaches in Khalsa College in Delhi University. He did his PhD from Delhi University, which was an English translation of Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. And I said to him, I wasn't his supervisor, deliberately not. I had supervised his MPhil. I wanted him to go to other supervisors for his PhD. So I advised him, I said that he must not only translate, he must also write a 75-page introduction. And that introduction is one of the most illuminating documents ever written about this book, Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. This book is coming out. Unfortunately, he tried many publishers, but finally he's found one, and that is the Sahitya Academy. They have accepted it. And after a little bit more editing and a foreword being contributed by someone else, it will come out, I hope, within this year. And then it'll be available in English for everyone to read. Akhilesh interviewed him towards the end of his writing his PhD. He interviewed Nambarji. I was also there to arrange the interview and see how it goes. Oh, hello, sir, I'm here. I see a message. So Akhilesh is here. And I'd very much like Akhilesh to participate in the discussion when we come to that. He is the most knowledgeable person on this book. And because he has translated each word, perhaps probably the most careful reader as well of this work. So he asked Nambarji 2 questions that I had put him to ask. And one was this: which word do you prefer in English? Nambarji's English was excellent, very discriminating. What did he not know in English? And he said alternative, not even the other, alternative tradition. And the other question that I wanted him to ask was, this relates to the last word in the title, Khoj. Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj, in search of an alternative tradition. In search means that it is a work in progress. It's not been formulated fully, it's only tentative. And in fact, I'd like to remind you of what he says right towards the end. This is the book, of course. Right towards the end of his own preface, Nambarji, what does he say? Last but one paragraph, he says, यह खोज तभी शुरू हुई थी. This search began when he met Hadari Prasad ji. Puri to aaj bhi kahan hui, and even now it's not complete. Hadari Prasad ji had just passed away 1 year before, and this book, therefore, is a long obituary of Hadari Prasad ji, a long memorial for Hadari Prasad ji. He says the search is not yet complete, far from complete, and still I am putting before the learned people, Vidwan, us khoj ki antarim report pesh karti hu. An interim report of that search. It's no more than that. One should not have very high expectations from this. He himself says it's only an interim report. So what I asked him several times too, and everybody asked him, I'm sure Purushottamji also asked him that. All his admirers asked him that, and some critics also. So when is this report going to be complete? When are you going to delineate the whole alternative tradition? We have only bits and pieces. And he would say, yes, let's see, and so on. But he never did. Therefore, what we have is not even a blueprint. There are some tentative preliminary remarks about what that alternative tradition could have been. So that is very important. He did not claim too much for this book, and let us not expect too much of this book. But the title is such an inspiring title. People who know only the title think that is one of the great books of criticism in India, who have not read a single word. Why? Because everyone wants to have an alternative tradition, or at least people of a certain ideology certainly want a tradition which is an alternative to the patriarchal tradition, to the Shastra-bound tradition, and so on. It is a very alluring title. But no, it doesn't even begin to fulfill those expectations. And that is why it's not my favorite book. I'll take up one other word, which of course is crucial and figures in the title. Dusri, Khoj, and now Parampara. All the discussion on this book has centered on the assumption, not only in English, but also in Hindi, that Parampara means tradition. That I have very serious qualifications about. No, it does not. Parampara and tradition are two very different words. And very often the essence of a word is lost in translation. Nambaji himself, when occasionally he used English, would use the word tradition. And so has everyone else. So let's try and contradistinguish between tradition and parampara. Parampara is one thing coming after another. It is chronological succession of events and the passage of time. परंपरा लग रही यहाँ ठहरे जिसमें जितना बल है, मीनिंग रेला आ रहा है, एक के बाद एक लोग आ रहे हैं, आप टिक नहीं पाएंगे, देखें कितना कौन टिकता है. The passage of time as reflected in a succession of events, that is parampara. What is tradition? Tradition is a body of thought or a mode of action that has been inherited from what has gone before. The main meaning is that of inheritance, that has been conserved in the past and then passed down for us to follow. There is no sense of that in parampara. In fact, the proper word for that sense of tradition, I suggest, would be paripati, a certain way of doing things as it was done before. It would be riti. It would be vidhan in that sense. It would not be parampara. No, our sense of history is based on parampara. It's not based on tradition. This has been demonstrated time and again by many Indian philosophers and by modern philosophers and some literary critics. Kalidasa does not name the whole tradition of dramatists before him. He names two predecessors. That is his parampara. And it is our great misfortune that both are lost to us because no work is available by either of them. That is parampara. It's not tradition. So that is the last thing that I wanted to say about the title. What I would suggest is that what Nambar is actually looking for here is neither parampara nor tradition. Nambar is looking for an alternative canon. He introduced the word canon later on, even in Hindi, and one slightly misguided listener to one of his lectures has produced now a whole book, a pretty poor book, called the Hindi Canon. I reviewed it. Purushottamji knows about it. There's not much in that book except the innovation that in Hindi a book has been written in which the word canon occurs, as gifted to this boy by Nambarji in a lecture, casually. But Nambarji began talking more and more about canon. And I think what Nambarji was looking for here is not only canon, but also canon. so many people who are talking about this book are talking about Kabir versus Tulsi. Now, this is not actually another tradition. This is another canon. And there's another very interesting statement which Akhilesh has quoted in the introduction to his thesis. Somewhere else, Nambarji says, Kalidasa is a writer of Vyanjana. And in Hindi, modern Hindi, we have Pant and we have also Prasad, who are writers of Vyanjana. So that is one tradition. Bhavabhuti, on the other hand, is a writer of Abhidha. And the modern poet who resembles him in this respect is Nirala. Now, this is extremely problematic. Who would say that Bhavabhuti is not a writer of Vyanjana in the same sense that Kalidasa is? Ityadibhihi prishataihi ranurudhya mugdham tamev. The rest is Vyanjana. Tamev, he interrupts his own sentence in the middle and says, Shantamatava kimatah parena. If this is not Vyanjana, give me an example of what Vyanjana is. This cannot be called Abhidha. So Nambarji was all the time groping towards a tenable distinction that you could make between the primary tradition and the alternative tradition. And he was doing most of his thinking through literary figures, through names, through authors. There were also, of course, some conceptual differences that he instituted, and those also we've taken into account. Arya and Anarya. This is the biggest one. And later, as Raviji was pointing out, Hindu-Muslim. Now, I found it very interesting that the same sentence, same statements are read by Raviji and by Purushottamji in quite different ways, and both are being unjust to each other. You know, there's an old joke, Woody Allen joke, about a wife and a husband being interviewed separately by a psychoanalyst. They have problems, and the psychoanalyst asks the wife, so how frequently do you have sex? And she says, all the time. He wants it all the time. And then he interviews the husband and says, how frequently do you have sex? And he says, hardly ever, she never wants it. And there's a couple with two different perceptions of what it is, which is hardly ever or all the time. What Hadari Prasadji said was, Raviji said, no, not at all. Is not at all, as Purushottamji pointed out, is Barahana. Purushottamji is not happy with Barahana, Barahana being the same, Charana being the Muslim difference, the difference made by the Muslims. But Charana is not insubstantial. The measure of what Hadari Prasadji was saying lies in between. He did not deny Muslim influence altogether, but he put it in place. He said, yes, okay, 25% and not more. It's a random kind of ballpark figure. It can't be held to that. If we look at what the influence is, what the nature of that influence is, yes, I totally agree that if the Muslims had not come to India, Indian history, Indian culture, Indian literature would not have been at all, if we say 100% the same, that would be totally wrong. Totally wrong. But if we say that they changed it 100%, that again would be totally wrong. We have to come to a mediated figure. And figures are not very helpful. In literature, in culture, figures are not very helpful. What is helpful is the blend. How does it blend? How does it show? That is important. And Shuklaji, Ramchandra Shukla and Hadari Prasad Trivedi, in their own different ways, were drawing attention to the fact that the Muslims made an impact. And they were both recognizing the impact made, and they were both measuring it somewhat differently. This is the point of interest. So that, I think, these two, Lok and Shastra, again, conceptually, Lok and Shastra, which he has some very interesting things to say about that. So, the dichotomy between the primary tradition and the alternative tradition is not that of Arya and Arya, my own understanding is. It's not that of Hindu-Muslim. It's not that, well, Lok and Shastra perhaps, yes. But also, Vachik and Likhit. That also comes into it because Lok is Vachik. Shastra is Likhit. Even Shastra was not Likhit. It was Vachik. It was in the oral tradition. It was memorized and kept safe, kept intact for a very long time. So these are the dichotomies that we need. And of course, the simplest of all, and therefore the most misleading of all, which is between Ramchandra Shukla and Harari Prasad. For Bara Anna, they are on the same page. At least 75%, they are saying the same thing. The differences between them have been polarized and exaggerated, it seems to me, in order to interpret what is meant by what Nambaji was saying. Now, about Lok and Raviji has already, there's a key passage here, which Raviji has already talked about, which I'll refer to very briefly, which is about a Shastra Lok Dvandva. In my edition, it is on page 78. इस प्रकार मध्ययुग के भारतीय इतिहास का मुख्य अंतर्विरोध शास्त्र और लोक के बीच का द्वंद्व है, न कि इस्लाम और हिंदू धर्म का संघर्ष. The main duality is that between Lok and Shastra and not between Islam and Hinduism. यदि शास्त्र लोक द्वंद्व पर किसी मार्क्सवादी पंडित को इसलिए एतराज हो कि वह वर्ग संघर्ष की वैज्ञानिक शब्दावली नहीं है, there is satire, there is irony in Marxwadi Pandit. Namvarji was as big a Marxwadi, especially in 1982, as any that could be found in the whole Hindi world. And yet, here he is having a little bit of fun at the expense of a Marxwadi Pandit. If they were to object that this is not the terminology of class struggle, then he refers to that John Irwin article from 1946 that Raviji has already cited. But let me quote another passage about Lok and Shastra. This is, I think, far more interesting. One moment. I'll come to that, but before that, I found something else. I said that the title of this book is entirely misleading, Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. Not only because of the individual terms that can be interpreted in different ways, but also because it holds up a promise that it does not even begin to fulfill, and that Nambaji never went on to fulfill. Now, what was the original title of this book? I think that is totally revelatory. That explains to us what this book is. After he completed it and gave the manuscript to Rajkamal Prakashan, Sheila Sandhu, the big owner and director of publishing, asked, so what's the title? And Nambaji said, the title is Harari Prasad Dwivedi, Kriti Evam Tatvanveshi. Kriti meaning a writer, a creative writer, creative meaning even in criticism a creative writer, which is what he argues here time and again in this book. Even his criticism is creative as his novels. So Kriti Evam Tatvanveshi. Somebody, a seeker of the truth, who wants the truth in logical terms. So the critical and the creative are both combined in Harari Prasad. And where does this terminology come from? This title, the terminology of this other title, the first title, Kriti and Tatvanveshi, it comes, of course, from Kalidasa, from Shakuntalam, and is quoted here, Vayam Tatvanveshan Madhukara Hatastvam Khalu Kriti. That's the Shikharni. So the title of this chapter is Tvam Khalu Kriti. You, the creator, you, the great creator. That's what he's saying about Harari Prasad. But his book shows him, Nambar's book, this book, shows Harari Prasad Vedi not only to be Kriti, but also a Tatvanveshi. The context in Kalidasa is, people may try and figure out how to go about when they are attracted by Shakuntala. They may give arguments, but the best is the Madhukar, the Bhaura, who goes and sucks the juice. So that is Kriti, performing an action. And the others are Tatvan Veshi. And according to Nambarji, Hazari Prasad is both. Primarily Kriti, then Tatvan Veshi. Both the elements are expounded hereby. So, one other thing that I'd like to talk about, and this is the last, maybe I've exceeded my time by now. There's the last thing that I would say, which is, this Vachik Parampara. It's not that Nambarji was only lazy. No. He did so many things in life, but he was reluctant to write. That, I think, was the reason. Great reluctance to write. Maybe it was a kind of perfectionism. Maybe it was a kind of allegiance to our older tradition, our older way of doing things, our older paripati. But I think most of all, it was the freedom that he wanted as a creative critic to think on his legs, to think as he went along, to invent, to make connections without being hindered by any previous preconception. That is the thrill of listening. It was the thrill of listening to him. It is the thrill of reading his lectures as it have been transcribed. Is that a loud signal that I should stop?
Not from me.
Or is that unintentional? I think it's Ravi's phone. Last thing that I'd say then is, this is the reason why. This is the reason why Nambarji's recorded lectures present him at his best, and what he did in this book, which is also a weakness. He says he has quoted, my estimate is, has quoted Hazari Prasad Dwivedi to such a large extent and such long quotations. My hunch is that about 70% of this book, Bara Ana, is quotation from Hazari Prasad. And the rest is very minimal commentary linking together the quotations. And why does he do that? It is osmosis. He says Hazari Prasad ji also opted for this method. And that is why he was such a creative critic. But look at the erudition of Nambarji. Last thing, he says in his preface, the one from which I quoted about it being an interim report, in the same preface, Nambarji says that Walter Benjamin wanted to write a whole book composed only of quotations. And he says, that is, I wish I had been able to do that here as well. That stringing together of quotations, juxtaposition of quotations, is the best insight into any writing. Thank you.
Thank you, Harish. Thank you very much. So far as, other points about Bare Ana, Charana, I have my own views on that, but it's not the time to engage with that.
I
The
think
important
Yogin is
category
here.
which I pointed out, an important category, Lok Dharma, which is important in Ramchandra Shukla and important to Hazari Prasad Dwivedi also. In fact, the dialectics between Lok and Shastra, Hazari Prasad Dwivedi proposes a way of looking at it, and it is historically factual. And that actually gives us an idea of the making of the Hindu tradition. He points out, numbers in quotes that again at length, that शास्त्र के स्तूपाकार वचनों में से जिसकी संगति लोक के साथ लगती है उसे मान लिया जाता है. So there is a whole lot of discourse, but in a given particular region, in a given region, whatever is suitable to local conditions is accepted. To give a very, very mundane example, a Brahmin from Western UP, a Brahmin from Rajasthan or Gujarat cannot imagine another Brahmin enjoying non-veg food. And on the other hand, a Brahmin from Bengal or from Mithila cannot imagine a Brahmin not enjoying fish. So, Lok or Shastra. And Hazari Prasad Dwivedi has reflected on these things. And here I would like to underline my disagreement with Harish, It may be a slim book, and maybe Premchand or Bharatiya Samaj, the best by number thing. Maybe it is full of quotations, only 25% number thing and 75% Ajari Prasad Dwivedi.
Yeah.
But those 25% are extremely significant and thought-provoking.
Yeah.
For example, as I mentioned, I think Namvar Singh is the first person who brings focus to epistemology in place of metaphysics in case of Nirguna Bhakti poets. He says their epistemology is not interesting. I am not interested in detailing the genealogy of their epistemology, whether they are Advaitvadi or Dvaitvadi or Dvaitadvait Vilakshanavadi. What I am interested in their way of looking at knowledge, their way of looking at world, and the relationship between knowledge and world, relationship between world and its interpretations. So I think this book remains a very, as I told you, I mean, I do not agree with many of the premises and proposals of Namvar Singh. But the point that we need to look at epistemology, and that epistemology is basically empirical rationalism. I think it provides us with a very exciting point of departure to look at the Nirguna Bhakti poetry. Arun just informed me that Yogendra has joined finally. So may I now request Yogendra?
Oh.
No, he has not joined?
No, Yogen said, look at the chat.
Okay, sorry, I didn't look at the chat. Okay.
Purushottam ji, I've joined, but I'm actually
Okay,
unable
yeah,
to
yeah, Chacha
contribute
Yogen, okay.
anything meaningful. So I'm just enjoying listening to you. My
Thank you,
apologies.
Yogendra ji. Thank you very much.
अभी तो
Thank you.
किसान
Thanks for
जिंदाबाद
joining.
चल रहा है और कुछ नहीं चल रहा मेरे
I
दिमाग
can
में.
understand.
My apologies.
आपके दिमाग में इस समय कोई परंपरा नहीं चल रही.
my
Yeah.
apologies.
No, it's perfectly fine. So now it's open for comments, and the only thing is that we have to be very brief and we have to be conscious of time. It's already almost 8:45. So can we start with Sudipto? Any observations, comments? Sudipto?
Very
Because I know
briefly-
you are fascinated with this book. I remember our discussion at CSDS. You wanted a whole day seminar on this particular book. So, yeah, please.
Let me make just 2 points very quickly,
Ji.
2 or 3 points very quickly. I both agree and disagree with all three of you. But who am I? In fact, who am I to say something about Dusri Parampara? But I'll say something because I feel strongly about this. I think all of you, in spite of all your criticism, Harish, for instance, saying that it's a slight book, with which I agree. I also agree with much of what you and Professor Ranjan said. But I think you would still agree with me if I say that the importance of a book lies not in what the book presents to me, but what the presence of the book makes possible in my own thinking.
Yeah.
I think that is the question of tradition, parampara, whatever you want to call it. And from that point of view, when I read the book twice or thrice. In fact, initially, Tani gave me a copy of the book. And I read it. I don't think I actually appreciated it sufficiently. I did not know Namoji at that time. Then I got to know Namoji very, very well in JNU. And when I read it second time, I thought that it was an extraordinary book, precisely because of all the possibilities of interpretation which have been brought out in your presentation. And let me make just one point about this. I think what he's saying is, Purushottam, what you said is also quite true. That tradition, there are two ways in which a tradition must evolve. One is the tradition must actually evolve in terms of what Harish called parampara. You and I must actually belong to a particular line of thinking. For that thinking to become strong and robust and powerful in opening up the world. Either intellectually or imaginatively. So we need that kind of, interconnection, handing over ideas from one to the other in elaboration, etc. But that precisely produces, opposition, questions, doubts about that. So, and I think what Namoji is saying, this is also reflected in what Harish said, which is why I would, I don't think I'm disagreeing with you. You know, when Namoji says it's an interim report, I think it's very, very savvy because it's a report about something on which you can never have
Quite
a
right.
final report.
Quite
You can write a final report as an individual, but he's also claiming that he is part of a tradition, you know, where at one point it is Ramchandra Shukla's way of understanding the Hindi tradition, right? But then that itself, you know, that's the important thing. That itself produces a reaction in Hadari Prasad, undoubtedly helped by his going to Shantiniketan, right? But comes from himself and produces a second position from which you now need a different interim report. And Hadari Prasad produces his interim report. You know, I've only read his Kabir, and I've read the volume of his collected works where you have the collection of the essays on Radha, which I really, really admire, right? And then you have Namarji, who in the meantime has become very heavily influenced by Marxism, but he controls his Marxism, as Harish pointed out, right? And then it requires a different interim report, you know, which he does in a, you know, in a kind of skimpy way. And so my enthusiasm for this book is not about what this book says, but what this book actually shows to be possible.
Yeah.
If people start reading the book means reading not the sentences in the book. Reading the book essentially means reading the ideas in the book. When we read Abhinava Gupta, you know, we simply do not recite the words, right? The words actually open up something which was inside me, which would have never come out if I had not gone through the provocation of reading him. So that's why I think, you know, I think all your criticisms are right and all your criticisms are wrong from this point of view. And I think you would agree with me that, you know, the important thing is to have I'm dissatisfied with the discussion today in a certain sense, not because of any inadequacy in what you said, but the enormity of the question that the book asks. That's why I said, Purushottam, that, you know, we need a seminar for 2 days to really understand what is going on in the book, because it's still going on. You know, when somebody says that this is my parampara from the BJP, right? So I can take a shallow position and say that, you know, this is not right and things like that. But if you want to take a serious position about this, you have to interact with the religious thought of our, you know, of our society. So I think that's why I feel that, you know, it's I gave a lecture which I think Arun attended the other day, which was called Marxism and Vaishnavism, which partly goes into some of these questions. And I wanted to finish by saying that, you know, I started thinking along those lines. Everything that went into the lecture in some sense was triggered by my conversations with Namoji. Sorry, I took too long.
Yeah, no. Thank you. Thank you, Sudipto. This was really, really wonderful. And it just reminds me of one thing, one sentence from my book, Akat Kahani Prem Ki, which Namarji enjoyed like anything. And he quoted it many times and he was very happy with that particular sentence. And the sentence went on something like this, कि परंपरा शब्द का इन दिनों बड़ा हल्का प्रयोग होने लगा है, something like that. प्रेमचंद की परंपरा, प्रसाद की परंपरा, महादेवी की परंपरा, परंपरा नहीं हुई, कोई व्यापारी फर्म हो गई, प्रेमचंद एंड सन्स, Prasad and Sons, and Mahadevi and Sisters. So Namarji enjoyed this sarcasm like anything. So you are absolutely right, Sudip. So this book is important, and so are other books, and particularly, as I told you, Kavita Ke Naye Pratiman. Kavita Ke Naye Pratiman is important to me because Nambar Singh, and it's like Ravi Ranjan ji knows, it's much more polemical than Dusri Parampara. It is extremely polemical and quite deliberately polemical. But the book is making a very fundamental point that there can be no literary criticism without a serious and value-oriented engagement with the text. I cannot surrender my values even if I am in the presence of the greatest literary text in way of terms, in terms of art and craft and all that. So this has to be a value-oriented reading. Similarly, in this book, you are absolutely right. The book is important because it provokes us. I mean, the book was published exactly 38 years ago. And it has been read as a very uncharitable attack on Ramchandra Sukla. It has been read as a hyper admiration of Ajari Prasad Dwivedi. It has been read as a distortion of the whole entire literary history of Hindi and all that. And it is being read the way we are reading it. And now I am really very excited and looking forward to listen to Akhilesh
Akhilesh
Yadav, who has as a recent
Akhilesh Kumar, not Akhilesh Yadav. That's a different man.
sorry.
He hasn't written Amberji.
You see the dominance of situations around.
Akhilesh Kumar.
Certainly not Akhilesh Yadav. I'm sorry. So Akhilesh Kumar, please, Akhileshji, please, I would like to have your comments on this. And please tell us about your translation of the book. And I hate to say this, but please be careful of the time limitation. But I am really looking forward to read your book, and I want to, and I'm sure everybody here would like to listen to you and about your impressions of this particular book, which you have translated. And I know Harish is not very generous in his praises. So when he's saying this, the translation must be really good, I'm sure. Yes, please. Akhilesh, bataiye. Is he there?
His phone is
Is he there? Akhilesh?
he's muted.
Oh,
He has to unmute himself.
Akhilesh, please unmute your phone or laptop, whatever
Send
it
a
is, and
message to
please say something. I can't see him here.
Hello.
Oh, yeah.
iPhone.
Yeah. Hello.
Akhilesh, aap hain?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please,
So,
please. Yes.
Good
yes.
evening, all. Yeah. Good evening, all distinguished guests. Yeah. I translated this book, and obviously Harish Trivedi sir supported me and helped me a lot. When I was translating this book, obviously I faced a lot of challenges, like how I should put the equivalence word from Hindi. There were some difficult words in Hindi, and I had to explore, or I had to search what should be the equivalence of the word in English. So when I translated when I completed first draft, I tried my best to be faithful with the original text. And during that process, I ignored several protocol which should be followed in English during the translation. So after that, when I began to edit the things, or when I began to write second draft or translate second draft, I improved a lot. But even then, when I translated, I realized that it is very tough to go away from the context or originality of the text. And sometimes, if you have to compromise with the grammar or syntax in target language, it does not matter because sense should come. But later in third draft, I realized that no, we should be faithful with both original literary tradition or with original work, and in that language where we have translated, or we are translating from original. So this kind of things I faced during the translation. And at present, I think that Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj is very relevant from the perspective of world literature also. Just, I will not take much time. I will give one example. In first chapter, Namar Singh quotes Ajari Prasad Dwivedi, and he says that if you have to know, or if you have to understand your literature, you must read the literature of neighboring state like Bangla, Oriya, and Assamese at all. So in my view, this thing may apply in the perspective of world literature also. If we will read other literature of other nation, it will give other perspective, and it will be very helpful for better understanding. And other thing is that obviously we can see in the context of first world literature and third world literature. Obviously here, according to my own interpretation, I might be wrong also, that first literature is referring to the established tradition, and especially in the context of canon. And third literature is slightly, obviously, literature of colonized country or colonized nation. So in this context, I can see, or with this example, I can say that Dusri Parampara is very relevant even in the context of world literature. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Akhilesh. Thank you very much. I'm sure every one of us is looking forward to your translation and your introduction to Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. Now, if there are any other comments or queries to both the speakers, I think if there are any questions and comments, they can be addressed to any one of us, including Sudipto, who is not quote unquote formally a speaker, or even Akhilesh, but I'm really getting worried about time now. It's already almost 9. So very briefly, if there are any comments and questions, please raise your hand, how, in whatever way it is done on this. Yes, what's your name, please?
Can I say Vivek?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
Thanks for the illuminating presentation, sir. I really enjoyed our discussion on Parampara. What I thought was missing from the discussion was, I think, something that Namvarji really stresses, which is, asvikar ka sahas. The fact that, and that's why I thought that, translating Parampara as canon might be slightly problematic, and maybe I would be interested to hear Professor Trivedi's comments on this, because I think one of the things that Namvarji constantly stresses throughout the book is that the way Hazari Prasad Dwivedi treated tradition, he not only valued preservation, but also tyag. So not only sangraha, but also chodna kya hai. And so, because the concept of canon stresses only preservation to that extent, and not what you leave. And it seems that if Namvarji is correct, and Hazari Prasad Dwivedi saw in Kabir, kind of like a kindred spirit, he suggests that Kabir's originality probably stemmed from his not having been so steeped in the Shastras. The fact that he could reject things that he had. So that's one point that I wanted to make. The other point was, which I really thought was fantastic in the book, was the way Namvarji brings out Hazari Prasad Dwivedi's Kridashilta. And I was wondering if that is something that he takes from the Bhakti tradition. That, and this kind of goes back to Professor Kaviraj's lecture, that is that one way of interpreting Bhakti tradition, to say that the Bhakti tradition essentially says that we should make our activities in the world, not just in the play world, but actually in the world, more playful. So
yeah.
Those were the things.
So your query is primarily addressed to Harish, but I would like to put in something here. Asvikar ka apar sahas. This is the phrase used by Hazari Prasad Dwivedi for Kabir. In fact, it is one of the chapters in the book Kabir. So asvikar, but the point is that in every canon or counter canon, there has to be asvikar, but at the same time preservation also. After all, you have to preserve even the asvikar. You cannot write on the tabula rasa all the time. You do not have a blank paper, you do not have a blank slate. So there has to be a tradition, canon, paripati, parampara, whatever you may call it. Secondly, and this comes out in your own, you see, if you look at the language and if you look at the idiom in which you are speaking, you are saying that sangrah nahi tyagna bhi hota hai. You are absolutely right. You remember where from this chopai comes? This is Sangrah Tyag Na Bin Pehchane. This is from Tulsidas. So in any understanding of Hindi literature or in any understanding of Hindi canon or Hindi creativity as such, the Purva Paksh and Uttar Paksh both are to be engaged with. And in this sense, I think it was in this sense, it is for Harish to respond to your comment. It is in this sense that every literature looks for canon, there has to be a canon. And of course, the point is that to what kind of value system that canon is oriented, what kind of literary pieces are given more importance, what kind of pieces are given less importance. Ramchandra Shukla did it. He did not throw away the Riti poetry, but he showed Riti poetry its place in a manner of speaking. So this is what it is. So in literature or in any academic discipline, you just do not throw away, you preserve. Even the act of throwing away is to be preserved. Please.
May I
respond?
say something?
Yeah, please. You first respond, then we can take the next comment or question. You first respond, Harish.
Yeah, very briefly. Yes, of course. I did not equate parampara with canon. No.
Yeah.
That cannot be done. That should not be done. What I said was that in talking about parampara here, what Nambar very often does is to construct a canon. There are many ways of doing it. One is conceptually, Arya and Arya Lok Dharma and so on. That's one approach that he adopts. But the other approach that has got greater attention and become more controversial is Kabir versus Tulsi and so on. So that canon, and as for Tyag, I think what he's doing there, Asvikar, what he's doing there is, in the first chapter, basically he's getting at Agay and Dinkar. It's not as if Agay and Dinkar were not for rejection, not rejection so much as things dropping away. Not everything carries forward. Some things drop away, some things you consciously leave out. So it's not as if there's a real distinction, but there's an ideological distinction which he accentuates, Nambar, by damning both Agay and Dinkar, who have pretty reasonable constructions of tradition in their own right.
Yeah.
It's an ideological battle. So canon is a very convenient way, a shorthand of defining parampara, the kind of parampara you have in mind, especially if you are contrasting it between Pehli and Dusri. Actually, Nambar has another word. He says, Panditon ki ikahri parampara. So his is not Dusri, but Dohari parampara. Dohari meaning including both.
All right.
And as for Kridashilta, yes, in Bhakti there is Kridashilta, but in some Bhakti, most Bhakti, there is also Maryada. And there is deep reverence, which contains the Kridashilta. A distinction that I'd make here is, and I've often thought about it, that the one major difference between Nambarji and Hazari Prasad was that Nambar's defining characteristic was wit, while Hazari Prasad's defining characteristic was humor. In that sense, they operated somewhat differently. I mean, I have so many examples of Hazari Prasad's humor. Some of them narrated to me by Nambarji and some that I directly came across. I taught for 8 months in the Banaras Hindu University when Hazari Prasadji had come back as rector. And the English department and the Hindi department were housed very close together. And we went and up and down the same steps. We had conversations on the steps, on the stairs, and sometimes in front of rooms, never entering each other's. So, and I listened to many lectures by him. And of course, with Nambarji, I must have listened to 500 lectures, it seems like. So I would say, Kridashilata, a part of it is Shastri. Kridashilata is as Shastri as possible because part of it is play with words. In all literary use of language, in all philosophical use of language, play with words is a way of making distinctions, making discrimination. So that Vidashirata is also to be found in different ways, humorous and witty, in both Hazari Prasad and Namdev.
Okay, Malindra wanted to say something.
Thank you, Professor Agarwal. I had a chance to talk to Professor Namwar Singh on this issue of Dusri Parampara Ki Khoj. I was writing an article analyzing Anam Das Ka Potha and Kankal. And the title of article I gave, Ek Aur Parampara Ki Khoj. And that parampara was Muktikami Dharm Ki Khoj, actually, Muktikami Dharm Ki Khoj. So I asked him that, is it fine if I call it Ek Aur Parampara Ki Khoj? He said, absolutely. As you said earlier, he said that there are multiple paramparas and there are many very, very liberative paramparas in Indian tradition. And we must read many of them, and we must read many of them together. And the best thing is that Hazari Prasad Dwivedi provides an epistemology to read them. Like Anam Das Ka Potha is an epistemology to read Indian philosophical tradition. It is not only a novel. I think that is something that is very significant. Thank you.
Thank you, Malindra. Thank you very much for this observation. Now, I think Mangesh Kulkarni. Yes, please, Mangesh.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, of course I can.
Yeah, well, for want of time, I'll be very, very brief. I just want to flag one concern, and that pertains to the importance of comparative inquiry. You know, when we are looking at Indian literatures, and definitely when we are looking at the Bhakti movement, and as you are aware that here in Maharashtra, we also had a very strong, Bhakti tradition. And I just want to point out that sometime in the 1960s, if I remember right, a very major work appeared that looked at the Bhakti movement from a broadly Marxist, unorthodox Marxist point of view. And that was by G.B. Sardar, who was a Pune-based scholar of Professor D.D. Kosambi's generation, actually. And this book was luckily quickly translated into English by a very competent translator. And that's available. And that was published, I think, by Orient Longman in the 60s. So I just want to flag this. And because often we don't have this kind of comparative inquiry. We would rather talk about Benjamin and so on, but not really about what work others, other good scholars have done, even of the same persuasion, in this case, Marxist persuasion from another part of the country on an analogous theme. And especially when it's available in English, I think this should feed into that larger discourse. That's all. I just want to flag that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mangesh.
Thank you.
What is the title? What is the title?
It's called Santa Sahityachi Samajik Falashruti.
No, the
so literally
English translation.
The literally it would mean something like the social impact of the writings of the saint poets. It has been translated by Kumud Mehta, and you just have to look for G.B. Sardar, online, and look for this particular title. And, I'll surely say, email the details to Arun, definitely.
Yeah, thank you. The only thing I would like to just say that in any discussion, in any conversation, it's actually not possible to say everything anybody wants to say, because there are limitations of time, there are limitations of what you have in mind. But certainly you have, this is a very important point, and so far as the importance of Marathi Bhakti poetry is concerned, I mean, let me just recall what Anant Das, the great hagiographer of all these Sant poets, who also wrote Kabir Parchai. In his Namdev Parchai, Anant Das, writing in, I think, 1588, in 1588, Anant Das writes, Kalajog Pratham Namde Bhaiya, Kesav apne kari kar liya. And on this, on the basis of Anant Das, I have built the entire argument in my book that what does Anant Das mean when he says that in the entire Kali Yuga, Namdev was the first Bhakt, was first significant Bhakt. So it is not as if this conversation between various Indian languages or the scholarship in various Indian languages is not taking place. Here it was a particular context, and therefore anyway, so I think this has been very interesting, exciting, and personally speaking for me, very enriching conversation. And I once again thank Arun for giving me this opportunity to participate. And I really thank Harish, Ravi Ranjanji, Sudipto, Manindra, and Mangesh, and everyone else who contributed. And of course, I look forward to this translation by Akhilesh. So thank you very much. And now it's over to Arun.
No, thank you. You can conclude now.
So, okay then. So it's over. Thank you. Namaskar. Namaskar.
Thank you.
Thank you.